My name is Gertrude Kohnke. I was the seventh child of 8 children born to Gottlieb and Lena Eichelay. The year was 1937. It was February 15th. And to the best of my knowledge, I was born on the farm that my parents moved to, but I would have to check my birth certificate to make sure. It could have been in Chicago because they lived in Chicago before they moved out to Norwood Park Township.
So do you think you were born actually on the farm and not in a hospital?
That's my recollection,
Mm-hmm.
but I know I have a delayed birth certificate, so I would have to check what's on it. But the reason I'm saying my name is Gertrude is my parents were from Germany and they always referred to me as Gertrude, but my siblings called me Gertie. So when one of my sisters took me to Penoyer School to enroll in first grade, they told me my name was Gertrude. I said, no, my name is Gertie. And they said, no, your name is Gertrude. So it wasn't until I went to the first grade that my name was really Gertrude in the United States. Before that...
Oh, you didn't know your name was actually Gertrude?
Correct.
Until you registered for school.
So I told them they were wrong. I said, my name is Gertie, because my siblings had called me Gertie.
Yeah.
And they said, no, your name is Gertrude.
So on your birth certificate, there must have been some formal document that...
I suspect. Now it makes me have to read it again. But when you've been Gertie all these years, now my siblings called me Gertie. My father-in-law called me Gertie, but most of my friends call me Gert. They tried Trudy, and as much as I like Trudy, it didn't stick.
It didn't work. So your mom and dad, both born in Germany.
Correct.
Both in Germany. And what kind of, okay, so they met and got married in Germany.
True.
Okay. So the war,
Before World War II started, the economy gets very bad. There's no jobs. People cannot find jobs. My father, there were 2 children born already in Germany, my brother Eugene and my sister Ruth, and there were no jobs available. The economy was bad, and they were recovering really still after World War I. So America opens up. They need jobs. There's jobs availability. So I believe my father had a brother Rudy who had already moved to the United States. So my father, I believe, comes in 1926. And my mother and my brother Gene and Ruth do not come until 1929. Then from there on, after Eugene and Ruth, Helen, Lottie, Wally, myself, and my brother, we always called him Fritz, but his name was Frieder, were all born in the United States.
So your mom took a boat with the 2 kids?
That's my understanding. I don't know the specifics of it. My niece Chris has the passports for my mother and my father because her mother is on one of those passports. So she had to have an entitlement to it before anybody else did because it helped even with her mother's citizenship.
Well, did your parents speak any English?
They did not speak English to us at home. Among my siblings, we spoke English, that's how come our English was fine. I feel bad to this day that we didn't retain it, although to this day too, there are certain words in German that there are I haven't found yet in English. And every once it'll come.
It comes back to you every once in a while.
Now, I always thought this was an interesting story too. My oldest brother Gene was drafted into World War II. And because he was born in Germany, they sent him to the Pacific. They did not send him to Europe. But while he was there, I believe he got wounded twice. He got 2 Purple Hearts, but he got malaria. And he was very, very ill. And so he was sent back to a hospital somewhere in Michigan. And all he would talk is German. You know, here he came as like a 5 or a 7-year-old. But when this malaria and the temperatures rose, that it was my understanding, he just went back to this German where it was his first language, you know, at the time.
So your dad comes first, and I think you mentioned once it was through Pennsylvania.
That's my understanding. They probably, because they were from Germany, and the Germans had a little bit more of a recognition than the Irish. The Irish were treated rather poorly when they came to the United States, but the Germans were lucky. So I do think my parents came through Ellis Island, through New York. I think there were some relatives in Philadelphia, and so that was the first stop for my dad. But then he got a job in Chicago with the Bowman Dairy Company. And the Bowman Dairy Company was a big company in Chicago. I think it's vanished now. But it was big in Chicago, and he got a job. So then he settled in, and then
he settled in. Then your mom came with your 2. So you were one of 8.
8.
All right, and what can you name the order?
I can. We always called my brother Eugene, but in German it was Eileen. And then my sister Ruth, I think she was always called Ruth. Helen was called Helen. My sister Lottie was Lieselotte. Then my brother Wally was Walter. And then there was Margaret. That was the Margaret. She was the one that I died in infancy, who I never knew. And then it was Wally, who was Walter. And then it was Gertrude. And then my brother Fritz was Friedrich. And when we were young, living on this farm, we chummed with kids on the next block. But when there was a call for dinner, they just called you. And it was this Gertrude, Walter. We would hear it, and we would come back.
But it wasn't like a German community, right? Like, did you guys kind of stick out? Like, were you the German family, or?
Not in that environment, because most of the relatives, my mother had brothers, and so we had this big family, and we had this big round kitchen table, and on Sundays the relatives came, and I remember they would always drink beer in big quart brown bottles, and they would crack an egg in it and put salt. And that's how they would talk, and they would talk, and they would talk Sundays away. But our home, this big kitchen and this big farmhouse, that was the center of our relatives or German friends that came.
Oh, that's interesting. Did you guys own it?
No.
You rented
it. Rented, and the property ran from Canfield all the way west, almost to Cumberland. It was a good piece of property. But keep in mind, I was 6 years old when my father dies. So my mother has these 7 children, and she's got this farm. So she rents out much of the land to a farmer down the way, Mr. Ollinger. So he came, and he would raise crops, and I don't know how he paid the rent, if it was part of the harvest, but he would also disc and prepare the field that she wanted, because she would still plant tomatoes. He had a huge garden. I know she even had corn. And I know there was a man, he worked for Lipton Tea Company, and he said, Mrs. Lenz, he said, I just went and picked the baker's dough, and here's the money I owe you, type of thing. And I know she raised onions because she sowed them in Jefferson Park. I think my Uncle Art must have transported them from the house to the market in Jefferson Park.
So your dad, you were 6 when your dad passed away. How did he die? What did he have, cancer?
Yes, it's my understanding was pancreatic cancer.
Oh,
yeah.
cancer.
Yeah, it was.
And what kind of guy was he? Like, was he a hard worker?
It's hard to tell. I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
But I don't have really good feelings about him.
Yeah.
Because I think he worked nights, and I think he stopped at the local pub on the way home.
Okay.
And I think there were disagreements between he and my mother, especially when it came to payday. And I can remember a particular instance that it got a little bit ugly.
Yeah.
And so, fortunately, it was winter. But I know my mother, at that time, there was chicken coops and there was duck coops, and they had stoves in them to keep the animals warm. And I know she took my kid brother and I out to one of these just to get us out of the house, you know.
Oh.
But how your memory goes back, this farmhouse, the back steps were enclosed, and there were like 5 steps. But the second step was neat because it was on a hinge. Because that's when the coal came, when they delivered coal.
Oh.
All they did was, and we were kids, we thought.
So they raised the back step.
It was a hinge like a door. You raised it, they took like bags of coal, just poured it, because the coal bin was underneath it then.
Oh.
So then when you went down these basement steps, that's where the coal bin was.
Oh,
When
did
were
you
a
guys,
kid,
you didn't go on their step, like there probably wasn't room for kids to hide
it was
under
dark.
there. Yeah.
It was scary. You know, you didn't want to go.
So your
But,
house was heated with coal?
Yes. Well, if you were lucky, the kitchen where my mother cooked, she was a marvelous cook. Don't ask me how she did this. Couldn't do it to this day. She had like a fuel oil stove in the kitchen that she cooked at. And of course, I don't think there were any indication of if you were cooking at 300 or 350 or 400. She just knew.
Yeah.
But I frequently, you know, she would have to clean out these burners to get this heat to go. In the living room, there was a potbelly stove, and those stoves were maybe 5 feet high, and you would use wood or coal. I will say this though, you only were warm if you were within 4 feet of it.
Oh, okay.
But we laughed. We would gather around it, you know, you'd put your feet up on the stove to keep warm.
So it was.
But we really, my sisters and brothers were funny. They really, even in spite of what happened, it was real. They were funny people. They could laugh. And you're this, you know, family of 7 at that point.
Because did you have a TV? I mean.
Oh, that was a big deal when
Yeah.
we got a TV. And it was a long time before we got one. But that's when you had an indoor antenna with these rabbit ears.
Yeah.
So we spent half the night.
You have foil at the end.
We didn't go that far. It was a Zenith television, but it never worked right. I always felt
black
sorry.
and white, obviously.
It was black and white.
Yeah.
And at that time, you took your TV in to get fixed. It never got fixed.
It never
you know,
got
it
fixed.
never works. Yeah.
So, but everyone had different personalities and stuff. So when you're
Yeah.
in the farm and.
But the big thing, even before television, was radio. We listened to the radio. You listened on Sunday afternoon. You were scared stiff, especially if you had to go upstairs where it was dark and cold. If you had outside plumbing and you had to go, you were scared stiff.
Yeah.
So these radio programs just embrace this, you know, and you've got 6 of us around the stove. You go out and get wood. No, you go out and get wood. You know, I'm not leaving this. I'm not going outside. You know,
Well,
it's cold.
wasn't it cold going to bed? I'm assuming you didn't sleep by the stove. But.
My mother, don't ask me how she did this, but as I mentioned, we had chickens and we had geese. She would get the down off of these geese.
Oh.
She made us all feather beds. We all had feather beds.
Oh.
And there were times when, especially upstairs where it was cold, it's hard to imagine now, maybe you've never seen it, but there were hot water bottles. That it was a rubber container, and she'd fill it with hot water, and she'd put it in so your feet would get warm. And sometimes there were 2 to a bed, so you had another body in there to heat it. But we all had feather beds.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's kind of neat. So you're on the farm, your dad passed away, and there's a lot of young kids, and you go to school. Now you said your siblings went to register. Like, did your mom not?
I do not I think with one exception, my mother never came. I don't think she came to graduations. She was German. She was not like the other people.
Right.
And you had to walk. We had a car for some time, but for the most part, we walked everywhere you went. And so she did not come, but I will say my sisters were really good to me. They were good to my brother. They really filled in.
They took good care of you guys.
They were.
Yeah.
They were wonderful.
So, so school, you go to elementary school, you walk to school?
We sure did.
Yeah.
Unless somebody was really nice that you knew and gave you a ride in the winter
So
time.
all winter time and
yeah. Like we had this conversation recently about the temperature. We said, we didn't know temperatures. It was you just went. It was cold.
It was cold. Yeah.
And so, but the hardest time was Valentine's Day. If Valentine's Day there was bad snow and bad blizzard and your Valentine's got blown away.
Oh.
That was hard.
That was hard.
Yeah,
what was the name of your elementary school?
Penoyer.
Yes. So there was a lot of Lens kids there.
Six
went through there.
Ruth, Helen, Lottie, Wally, myself, and my brother Fritz. So yeah, the Lens name was...
The Lens name.
Has to be somewhere.
And what, did you wear, you didn't wear a uniform there, did you?
Not at all. That was interesting too. I may have mentioned you in the past, like the girls all wore dresses until we got introduced that we were going to have gym class. So if it was gym class in the morning, you could wear slacks in the morning. But if you had gym in the afternoon, then you could change into your slacks for the afternoon. But other than that, you wore a dress.
And what kind of student were you at?
I loved school.
You loved it?
I really loved school. I had wonderful teachers. Mrs. Lewis in 5th and 6th and Mrs. Gardner for 7th and 8th.
You remember your...
Oh, yeah, vividly. Yeah, they were like second parents. I mean, they were... because we had 2 classrooms to a room. If this was a classroom, that teacher taught 1st and 2nd. The next time you moved up, you were in 2nd and 3rd. So with Mrs. Lewis, and Mrs. Lewis loved geography. I loved geography. So it was wonderful. That class was a joy to be with. And Mrs. Gardner too. These teachers seemed so old at the time, and they probably weren't. But they genuinely cared what happened to you. And when we went to school, it was learning. It wasn't the grades. It was, they wanted you to learn as best you could. They did, but you had 15 to 18 kids to a class. But these poor teachers, you'd get some kids and another, do your homework, while I'm teaching this class. I'm sure it was hard on the teachers.
Well, I always have known you to be, like, you're a fast learner. You memorize things the first time thing.
Not always.
I'm learning through this process that I'm a lot more like Dad in some ways. But I know you like to read now. Were you a reader then? Were you...
When you think World War, II was going on, that was a very serious time. And when we would get like newsletters in school, and the teachers tried to make us aware what was happening in the world. This was a world war, and so it was kind of scary in that respect. But I'm sure Dad has talked to you about. Yet as kids, we had this freedom, and maybe it was a lack of supervision where, like, sometimes, as they say, we'd leave in the morning and it was, we'll come home when the lights go on.
When it's dinner time.
Our parents really did not know where we were at. We lived at Oriole Park. We swang on the swings all day long, but we talked and we talked and we talked. There was a lot of discussion. So you
would go to school, you'd come home. So you had a farm. Did you have responsibilities on the farm? Or?
I did not very much. I can remember this.
You were the young of the young ones.
But I made a farming mistake. I remember we would have these hotbeds, and my mother would be growing tomatoes from seeds, and I was going to go out there and help them weed. Well, I was pulling out the wrong ones. I'm pulling out the tomatoes, and they said, "No, not the ones with the hairy stems." Oh yeah. And one other time,
crop a year.
One other time, there was a circular tile in the front yard, and somebody had put some things in there, and I pulled them out. And my poor mother had put in like bulbs for tulips.
Oh, yeah.
What are these things doing in here? And I pulled them out.
You took care of that.
Yeah.
And on the farm, you had farm animals, right?
We did. And now I don't know if they inherited it when they rented the farm, but our horse was Buck. And I may have mentioned earlier, Mr. Hank lived next door. And when it came time that they needed the machinery in the field, he would borrow our Buck horse and hook it to with his horse. So he had two horses pulling these vehicles, and then when we needed it, we would use his horse. And we had
Who plowed, like to plow a field, or what did you?
Well, I don't know if Mr. Olier, when he rented it, but my Uncle Art, I know my Uncle Art was there a lot, my mother's brother. And he may have done some of it as well. I think my dad tried to do it before he got sick, that he tried to do it. But at that
What
time...
kind of crops were they plowing? Like, it sounds like, to
I
me,
know-
two horses, you go for...
I know like it was, they would do field corn and sweet corn. I know for like to sell into the Jefferson Park stores that there was tomatoes and onions, some muskmelon, I think, that perhaps. But it was a small, garden. But everybody had to help each other. But I remember this, when we were kids, we had this beautiful tree in the front yard, and we'd climb it, and we'd sit on these branches, and we'd watch the cars go by. But I also remember when German prisoners of war came here, they used them on farms. And we would see these truckloads and these men standing on the back, but they were all prisoners of war. And they would help the farmers in the area. But a lot of these farmers liked it here. And once they went back to Germany, then they came on vacation, they brought their wives, that they liked the area. But at the time, you really don't know history's being made. It's like you read about it later. But at the time, history was being made. But I can't remember the day World War II started. But I remember the day it stopped. Because the neighborhood came alive.
Yeah.
People were banging, and it was such a big happening.
It's a big thing.
It was.
And dogs. Did you have a big dog?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mentioned we had Buck was the horse. Our cow was Elsie.
Oh, Elsie.
And our sheep was Blackie because it had a black face. And whenever the song Mersey Dotes and Dozy Dotes and Little Landsy Ivy was popular, we had this cat. And she had a litter of kittens constantly. We had kittens galore. But our dog was Jim. And Jim? Yeah, his name, don't ask me why it was Jim, but it was Jim.
Okay.
And
what kind of dog? Do you remember what kind of dog
it was? A mutt. Everybody had mutts, type of thing. And even my mother didn't allow him in the house at all, but she would allow him like in this outer hallway by the steps if it got real cold. If it got real cold, she'd let him in there.
Yeah.
But other than that, they slept in the barn, they slept in the sheds.
Oh, they did. Elsie the cow.
Elsie was the cow,
Yeah.
Buck was the horse, Jim was the dog. Yeah.
And I think I recall hearing a story that even I think Dad mentioned it, not today, but in the past, as you really enjoyed ice skating. And you would ice skate. How did that work? Like, how did you ice skate?
If I was going to come back in another life, I wanted to be Sonja Hennie. I don't know if you know who Sonja Hennie is. But I think she originally comes from Norway. And she wins the Olympics, figure skating. And we'd see her movies, and I thought I could fly like she could fly. So on the farm, there would be rows of corn that got cut down, but there would be ice in between. I'd skate up and down, anywhere there was a patch of ice, I would skate.
Wasn't it
I
little or? I mean, it went
it was
distance,
long,
it
right?
Was long.
It was there and back, but still, you managed,
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
So, you're in elementary school, and did your school, was it through 8th grade? Like, did you go? It was through 8th grade. And then your mom, you're 16 years old, right? And
when she dies?
When your mom passes away, it's 16.
Yes.
Which is incredible. Well, you're in high school, I guess, at that point.
Right. I was like the sophomore, and I do remember coming back to class that first time, and there was Janet Lewis sat right behind me, and the instructor that we had, or whoever the homeroom teacher was, he said, "We welcome back two of our students who both lost their parents." And the girl behind me, her dad had passed away, and it was my mom. So there were two people that in that homeroom class.
Oh, and your high school is called
Maine Township High School.
Maine
It was the
Township.
only Maine.
Okay.
Now I think there's four.
I
But
think it's Maine East now, isn't it?
there's a south, a north, a east, and a west, I think now.
Okay.
But then it serviced the kids coming from Des Plaines and Park Ridge. But we were Norwood Park Township. You know, this was a little different. We were not part of the Park Ridge and Des Plaines kids who all knew each other.
Oh.
You know, they fed in from the junior high.
Now, was your mom ill? Was she?
Oh yeah, she had it was liver cancer. She had yellow jaundice. She was ill a long time.
So
yeah.
you were still on the farm at this point.
We
You
were
still living there, and your older siblings were there helping out. Like,
what happened when my mother got very ill? My sister Ruth and my brother-in-law Frank, and I think they had two children, lived out in California. And when they knew my mother was really seriously ill, Ruth came back with the children, and never went back. I mean, Frank then moved here. They lived in the farm next door. There was a vacant house on there. And then Fritz and I lived with my sister Ruth. And then Helen and Wally lived with my sister Lottie. And then at some point in time, Fritz and I and Wally and Helen got an apartment in Park Ridge. And that was, I was out of high school by then and working at Aetna.
okay, so all right. So you went through high school. What about family trips? Did you guys ever do anything? Did you go anywhere together, or?
No, not as a family, with one exception. And my sister Ruth told me later, she felt bad about this, that she had a friend and the family had a cottage up in like Dork County. And my sister Ruth had been there, and after my father died, she got a healthy income tax return. And she said, "I'm going to take all these siblings of mine
Ruth said this? Yeah.
on the train, and we're going to go up to Dork County." And she did. And then a few days later, my mother arrives with this friend of theirs, drove them up there. And my sister Ruth said, "You know, that was a terrible thing to do to my mother." Is
not
that
invite her? Or?
Well, my father dies, and all of a sudden, all these kids are gone. All of a sudden, she's there by herself, and she said that was not nice, you know.
Oh.
And she felt bad. My mother never said anything about
Yeah.
it, but you know, that was the first time we had been on a train. It was a big deal because we had to go downtown and get this train,
And everybody went. All the kids went.
We all did. I have pictures, black and whites. You know.
Oh, so that's
So
a good memory.
that was about the only. There was only one other short one. It was down to Rantoul, Illinois, and my dad was dead, but my mother had a girlfriend down there, and so we got down there. The friend must have driven us down there, but we were going to come back on a bus, probably a Greyhound bus. So they make the arrangements, and when the driver says, "I only have seats in the back of the bus," we said, "Fine, no problem."
Yeah.
Till we go and we realize the back of the bus is all African American. We had never been confronted with that. You know, all of a sudden we were like, okay.
Yeah, it was a new experience.
It was. We
Yeah.
survived, and it was an education.
So did your mom speak German to you guys through that
all
whole
the time, because all the time.
So that was her, but she understood English, or?
I'm not sure. I don't remember that we would speak German to her. I don't remember that much. I only remember is if my friends were with me and they were going to go to the store, my mother would say in German, "Don't go with your friends. You're going to get this thing mixed up." And my friends would say, "What did she say?" And I said, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's all right. Don't worry about it." You know, what'd she say?
But that was kind of neat because all through school you must have been able to speak German fluently.
You would think so. It was a low dialect of Germany because it was Pforzheim. She was from Pforzheim, and Dad's grandfather came from New Leiningen, Germany. but the dialect was a little different. It was like a Low German. And sometimes when I watch a movie, I can pick up some words. But when Dad and I were in Germany, there were times I could, get us something to eat, and then I argued with the guy when we had a rented car, and I said, no, ich weiß nicht, was ist los, enough that he said, all right, you don't have to pay it.
Yeah, because now when I look back, I think that's awesome. Like, it's amazing, to be bilingual, and...
I wish I had kept it up. I wish I had kept it. Although now I think maybe Spanish would be better.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And did you have like girlfriends in school? Like, did you have friends? Did kids come over to your house, or was it uncomfortable?
You've hit it right on the head. It wasn't. That house was not a situation where we had friends in. Mm-hmm. With the exception, my brother Fritz had like 2 friends. And one was Billy Keel, and he sold his Sunday newspapers at St. Eugene's Catholic Church after Masses on Sundays, but he would always bring our newspaper. He brought it in the house, so we always had the Sunday newspaper, and he would come and spend time with us.
Yeah.
And then, this was a kind of an interesting story. Fritz had a friend named Earl Fett, and this was just before we moved here, and I'm in the yard working on plants, and this man comes up the driveway and
pulling out the plants, right?
Probably wanted to. And he says, by chance, he said, "Did you have a sister Helen and a sister Ruth?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you Gertie?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm Earl Fett." And I knew right away who he was, but he said, "When your brother Fritz died, my mother cut out the obituary."
Oh, he pulled up to your house in Villa Park?
In Villa Park. And I'm working in the yard. This was only like 2 years ago. And he came, and Dad and he and I sat in our garage. We probably talked 2 or 3 hours. There was a lot to catch up on.
That's something.
Now, I do keep in contact with probably 6 of the people that went to Penoyer, that we exchanged Christmas cards. We used to go to Maine Township's reunion, but we had our own group, because we were from, Penoyer, and about, I think 6 of them are dead already. So for a small group, I know where most of them are, or it was interesting, and nobody looks like they did when they were in the 8th grade. So,
well, when you were in high school, did you go to any like football games or any basketball games?
The football games were on Friday nights. We went to a lot of them. I did join clubs, but the clubs were hard too, because you had to take a late bus, and the buses didn't run real late in Park Ridge. And sometimes you'd have to go to the highway and change buses and go on another bus. And there was a kid that went to Penoyer. His name was Jojo, and I think he was older than the rest of them. And he had a car, and so when he would drive us, we would have this car. And so then we got to go to things. But we went to as much as we could.
Did you ever own a car? Did your mom drive?
No, my mother never drove.
She never drove.
But when my brother Gene came home from the war, he got a job with Ford Litzinger. And part of the deal was he bought these nice convertibles, salmon color, and he let me use it. To this day, I don't understand that he would let this girl... I had my driver's license.
You had a license?
I had a license, and I had a lot of friends, because I had this convertible.
Yeah, I had a lot of friends.
Yeah, but my siblings were very good to me. I mean, he took me to the opera. My sisters took me to the ballet. As they say, they would go to, if I was in something at school, they came to see me.
Yeah.
So they were good to me.
Yeah. Well, obviously, I know I was fortunate enough to know all your siblings, and Aunt Ruth. I always laugh. Just you know, she was always to me the out of the box. You know, she always did things differently.
You're right.
And
You're right.
I just remember laughing really hard.
She was a free spirit.
She was a free spirit.
You laughed at my sister Ruth for a different reason than you would laugh with Helen.
Yeah.
My sister Helen was funny.
She was genuinely really funny.
Yeah.
And,
good-hearted and very funny.
Yeah, she was awesome. So how about going to the movies? Did you ever have opportunities to go?
You know, movies were a wonderful escapism when you were a kid. And I'm sure Dad probably mentioned the Time magazine, but to me it was the Gateway Theater, and that was in Jefferson Park. It was magic. They had stars on the ceiling. They had plants behind gates. And when you were a kid, you didn't care where you came in the movie. It didn't. You could come in the last 10 minutes because they're going to play it again. You know? And then when you were with somebody, you didn't want your friend to nudge, say, this is where we came in, we should go. So everybody kind of stall, you know.
Because you wanted to stay till the end?
Oh, we'd see the movie again if we had it for a second time. But the Gateway Theater, I believe it's still there. It's been remodeled into something else. But it was an escapism. It was like you were in another world. It was absolutely beautiful. And when you'd come out, and you probably were in there for a long time, and, you know, the sun would hit your eyes.
Do you remember anything, like, because this was before Gone with the Wind, like, wasn't it? Like, was there any movie that grabs you, or movie stars that really...
I just wanted to be Sonia Henney.
Yeah, you just wanted to be a nice skater.
Roy Rogers was good, you know, but there weren't too many female actresses. But Sonia Henney, and my friend, she wanted to be Esther Williams.
Esther Williams, the swimmer.
Yeah, right, she was a swimmer, but I wanted to be a skater.
So was there anyone that you idolized, whether a movie star or politics, or was there anyone that you kind of looked up to at all, or was there any role models?
I don't think so. Stuart Granger maybe got close, because I think he played in a movie called King Solomon's Mines, and I think it comes up now and then. And he would have been the only one. But no, I don't think...
There was anyone that really...
No, there wasn't. I don't think we were taken in. You know, we were much more jaded, I think. Yeah, you want to say you've got to prove yourself.
So, when you were in high school or before that, any jobs? Did you work any jobs at all?
I remember that we had a neighbor, and they had a florist business, and Fritz and I would go over and we helped them in their florist business. And it was a training program, but it was mostly in the spring of the year that they would have us working there. We were kids, we were young, and I remember helping the Gannons. The Gannons had the hardware store, and we helped out there a few times. But I mostly would help take care of the house. I was a cleaner.
Yeah.
This was a big house, and I liked the house cleaner than it might have been had I not done it. So there was much to be done.
Yeah, well, especially having your mom, both your parents pass away so early.
But you consider, there was only one faucet. No, there was a faucet in the basement. I shouldn't say that for laundry. But there's only one faucet in the kitchen, and there's no hot running water. So you spent a lot of time doing dishes. You spent a lot of time heating water. Everything took time. You walked to the store, you walked back, you made a mistake, you had to walk back again to make the correction. So you spent a lot of time walking and on buses.
Yeah. So we knew, you mentioned there's 8 of you, and then Margaret died in infancy, so there were 7 of you. But everybody has passed, right? Like all your siblings.
You're right. My sister Ruth, I think, I'm going to be 81, and my sister Ruth, I think, died at 83. So if I make it 2 more years,
you'll be there.
Yeah, I will have outlived everyone.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, in my family, just about everybody, well, my brother Fritz died as a result of a car accident, but almost everyone else had a heart condition.
Yeah.
So I've been fortunate to have good doctors that have been pasting me together.
Good pacemaker.
Yeah, so far so good. So right. So yeah, I've been very fortunate.
Yeah. So as a kid, did you ever, and especially living on the farm the way you did you ever think that you would end up like this, married with 2 kids? You had a nice home and food on the table regularly, and
It just like as I say with our school, it was learning more than the grades. I don't think that most kids were encouraged to go to college. I don't think they were saying, well, where do you want to be in 10 years? Like now, where do you want to be in 5 years?
right.
People didn't live as long. They were glad to have jobs. They were coming out of World War II, and then they'd go into, another war right after that. So there were a lot of friction in the world that your personal achievements weren't emphasized, and not having parents there. Now, I will say this. I think my sister Ruth had said, my sister Helen offered to pay, like, to write junior college, and she said, I think you thought you couldn't do that to Helen, that she's your sister. She can't pay for my tuition to go to college.
Oh, so yeah,
that was Ruth's interpretation of it, that Helen would have done it, and I said, I can't do that to you.
Yeah.
So I didn't.
Oh.
Yeah.
But Helen went to college?
She went to Northwestern. She took night classes forever. I mean, she joined a sorority. She was very active. I know she got her in that obituary. It says she has her associate, so she has at least 2 years. But she was doing it at night school.
So I think I knew Lottie probably the least.
Right, because she lived in the city.
She lived in the city. I don't think
Right.
we saw her as much.
No, she had us. She had us for Thanksgiving one year, and my brother Wally was not very nice, and it was a very awkward departure.
Okay.
And so it took a while for things.
Wait, were you married? Were we all there?
Yes.
Oh, we were all there, and it ended up
not pleasant.
Yeah, a scene you'd see in a movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it took a while before we got together again.
Yeah.
These things happen.
So over the last 80 years of your life, you've seen a lot of world changes. A lot of things have changed in your lifetime. Is there any invention or anything that's kind of stood out in your mind that
Beside hot and cold running water and inside plumbing?
Well, considering where you came from.
They were very nice. I think one of the biggest things is in medicine is like antibiotics.
Mm-hmm.
I know like now there's a tendency to be cautious about taking too many antibiotics. But when you have young children and they have a condition and this antibiotic is going to do it, it was wonderful.
So like when penicillin came around, amoxicillin, it was kind of like this miracle.
That and polio. Polio was a scare to us because they would have these iron lungs in shopping areas and stuff. And, they closed the pools and they didn't know what was happening, that we couldn't go to the swimming pool for 1 or 2 summers because of polio. And then it was a salt vaccine, and then there was another one. But even you and John, I come across the cards that you got they used to give on a sugar cube was the first dose, and we had to get you 3 doses. But polio was a terrible
Because
thing.
back in the day, I think I remember kids walking
Yeah,
their legs.
braces. They would have braces,
or
paralyzed.
Yeah.
They did.
And I remember that, and you don't see that anymore. That's.
I remember one time too, it was the end of the day at school at Penoyer, and I know there were some others, and there was a thought that they were looking at me, and I thought, why are they looking at me? But then I got home, and my brother, Wally, had scarlet fever, and the health department then came and placed a red sign on your door, and it was like quarantined. They didn't want people visiting you, or that you might spread it. So the health issues improved tremendously. I think when you had the different shots that you had to get into school, it cut down on a lot.
Yeah.
So I would think that from my point of view, it was the benefits of medicine.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, one of the last questions that I asked Dad was about seeing the Chicago Cubs win the World Series. You know, I know he went to games. Were you able to go to any Cub games when you were younger at all?
We had a good run. Dad's cousin Joe Weber had 2 to 4 tickets sometimes for Cub games for several years, and he shared them with us, and they were good. They were
and that
good.
was later in life, right? I mean, that was after we moved out, right? Or
No, good. Well, yes, you're right, because I remember one
all I
time
know is you didn't
took
share
Garrett.
with us, Mom.
Yeah, because one time, yeah, right. 'Cause no, one time Garrett and I went down, and Garrett and we get inside the stadium, and I said, we'll get our hot dogs here, and he's running over their steps. I said, where are you going to go? And he says, I'm going to save us a seat.
Oh.
I said, no, we got tickets. So Garrett and I went, and then Dean and Dad went. And then one time we went at night. It was Dean, Garrett, Dad, and I. But that's when Dean, like the first baseman, he was a lefty. Oh, he's the guy that left. Yeah, Mark Grace. Yeah, Mark Grace. So I know I took you down, and we got as close to Mark Grace as we could because he was lefty. And then we got to see him.
So did you ever think you'd see a World Series in your time? I mean, that's 80 years of
it didn't bother me if we didn't, you know.
Yeah.
I was glad to see the Bulls do what they did. I was glad to see that the Bears went to the Super Bowl. I was glad that the Sox got to be in the World Series. So,
and the Blackhawks have won.
Right. That in our lifetime, we've seen our sports teams do well, and it gives us bragging rights.
Right.
We go to another part of the world, and we
proud to be a Chicagoan.
Soccer. We have to work on soccer.
Yeah.
But these other things it gives you bragging rights when you go to a different city. And
yeah.
You know, what I like is like when Dean talks about going to Ireland, the possibility of going to Ireland, having been to Mexico and having been, I get all excited because we've been to some of these places, and you want to say it's going to be so much fun. Mm-hmm. You know, there's just so much to take in. I remember when the first trips to Europe to have tablecloths and fresh flowers, you know, that everything that you went, there was something that you brought back that I think made you a better person, you know. Mm-hmm. But yes, even as I say, we had the good fortune, our health was good, that we could go to a variety of places in the world. And we went to Egypt after 9/11. And everybody canceled their flights. We had Egypt to ourselves. But we had some of the best discussions because we were on the Nile River, but our guide was Muslim. We had a variety. And there were people, he was a pilot for KLM, for Dutch Airlines, you know. So you had some very open discussions because there's like 6 of you. And then they didn't want to let the crew go, and so they would give us these feasts on top of deck. But these are opportunities. Unless you go,
right,
it's not going to happen.
Right.
So I'm glad to see the grandchildren, you know, going to these places because I want to see them on a map. You know, where you're going. You know. But I hope he takes lots of movies and lots of films. So because I love the Canadian one, I think the Canadian one you really excel. But.